10 black R&B legends who tragically died of AIDS. Some of the most famous voices in black music history were hiding a devastating secret. While millions of fans were dancing to their songs on the radio and in nightclubs, several legendary R&B and hip-hop stars were quietly battling a disease the world barely understood. And in some cases, the truth didn't come out until after they were gone. Today, we're uncovering the real stories behind these artists and the epidemic that changed the music industry forever. Stay with us until the end, because some of these stories may surprise you. Eazy-E, Eric Wright. Eric Lynn Wright, better known to the world as Eazy-E, emerged from the streets of Compton, California, to become one of the most influential figures in the history of West Coast rap. Born on September 7, 1964, Wright grew up in a neighborhood shaped by poverty, crime, and systemic challenges, circumstances that later influenced the raw storytelling that defined early gangsta rap. In the mid-1980s, he founded the label Ruthless Records and soon helped form the groundbreaking group NWA alongside Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, DJ Yella, and MC Ren. Their 1988 album Straight Outta Compton would later be recognized as one of the most important hip-hop records ever created, reshaping the direction of the genre and giving voice to realities rarely heard on mainstream radio. Eazy-E's distinctive high-pitched delivery and unapologetic lyrics made him instantly recognizable. Tracks like Boys in the Hood and Real Motherfucking G's established him as both a controversial and highly influential artist. Yet despite the tough persona portrayed in music videos and lyrics, many collaborators described Wright as a sharp businessman who understood the power of independence in the music industry. Through Ruthless Records, he helped launch several successful artists and demonstrated that hip-hop could be built into a powerful business enterprise. In February 1995, Wright was admitted to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles after experiencing severe breathing difficulties. Doctors soon diagnosed him with AIDS-related pneumonia. On March 16, 1995, he publicly confirmed his condition through a statement to the press, encouraging young people to learn from his situation and protect themselves. Just 10 days later, on March 26, 1995, Eazy-E passed away at the age of 31. His sudden death shocked the music world and sparked renewed conversations about HIV/AIDS awareness within communities that had rarely discussed the illness openly. Did you remember where you were when you first heard the news about Eazy-E's passing? For many fans, the moment marked the loss of an artist who had helped change the sound of American music. His influence extended far beyond chart success. NWA's recordings opened doors for countless rappers who followed, and the group's fearless approach to storytelling redefined how hip-hop could address social realities. Today, decades after his passing, Eazy-E is remembered not only as a pioneering voice in rap, but also as a cultural figure whose legacy continues to shape the evolution of hip-hop around the world. Sylvester James Jr. Sylvester James Jr., the powerful voice behind the disco classic You Make Me Feel Mighty Real, was one of the most recognizable performers of the late 1970s dance and R&B scene. Born on September 6, 1947, in Los Angeles, he first developed his remarkable falsetto singing in church choirs before eventually moving to San Francisco in the early 1970s. That city's vibrant music culture helped shape his career, and by the end of the decade, Sylvester had become a major figure in disco, performing in packed clubs and appearing on national charts. Songs like Dance, Disco Heat, and You Make Me Feel Mighty Real turned him into an international star and a symbol of the energetic nightclub culture of that era. During the early and mid-1980s, however, a new health crisis was beginning to affect communities across the United States. In 1981, doctors first reported cases of a mysterious immune system disease that would later be called AIDS. At the time, the illness was poorly understood, and fear and stigma surrounded those who were diagnosed. Like many people during that period, Sylvester faced the disease during a time when effective treatments were not yet available. By the mid-1980s, Sylvester had been diagnosed with HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. Despite the serious health challenges that came with the illness, he continued recording music and supporting charitable efforts aimed at helping people affected by the epidemic. Friends and colleagues later recalled that even as his health declined, he remained committed to performing when possible and to raising awareness about the disease that was impacting so many lives. As the disease progressed in the late 1980s, Sylvester's condition worsened due to complications associated with AIDS. On December 16, 1988, he passed away in San Francisco at the age of 41. His death came during a time when the AIDS epidemic had already taken the lives of thousands of Americans and deeply affected the entertainment community. Before his passing, Sylvester made a remarkable decision about his legacy. He arranged for the royalties from his music catalog to be donated to organizations supporting people living with HIV/AIDS, including the San Francisco AIDS Emergency Fund. That decision ensured that the songs which once filled dance floors around the world would also help fund care and support for those facing the same illness. Today, Sylvester is remembered not only for his extraordinary voice, but also for the lasting cultural impact he left behind. His music continues to play on classic R&B and disco stations, reminding listeners of an era when the dance floor was alive with energy, and when one unforgettable voice could bring an entire room to life. Bobby DeBarge. During the late 1970s, R&B radio across the United States was filled with smooth melodies and emotional ballads. Among the voices that stood out most was a remarkable falsetto that listeners could recognize almost instantly. That voice belonged to Bobby DeBarge, a singer whose talent helped shape the sound of Motown-era R&B during a time when the music industry was entering both a creative peak and a difficult historical moment. Robert Louis DeBarge Jr. was born on March 5, 1956, in Detroit, Michigan, a city known for its deep musical roots and the influence of Motown records. From an early age, Bobby showed a natural gift for singing. His unique falsetto quickly set him apart, and by the late 1970s, he had become the lead vocalist of the R&B group Switch, a band that would go on to release several successful songs including There'll Never Be and I Call Your Name. These tracks became staples of soul radio stations and helped introduce Bobby's voice to a nationwide audience. Beyond his own career, Bobby also played an important role within the DeBarge family. As the eldest sibling, he helped mentor his younger brothers and sisters, who would later achieve major success as the group DeBarge during the 1980s. Their music, including hits like All This Love and Rhythm of the Night, carried the influence of the smooth vocal style that Bobby had already helped establish. If you listened to R&B radio during the late 70s or early 80s, do you remember the first time you heard that unmistakable falsetto voice? However, the same decade that brought success also brought serious challenges. During the early 1980s, the United States began confronting a new and poorly understood health crisis, the HIV/AIDS epidemic. At that time, medical knowledge about the disease was limited, and many people living with HIV chose to keep their diagnosis private because of the stigma surrounding it. Bobby DeBarge was among those whose health was affected during this period. Over time, he experienced complications related to AIDS while also dealing with other personal struggles that impacted his career. On August 16, 1995, Bobby DeBarge passed away in Grand Rapids, Michigan, at the age of 39 due to complications associated with AIDS. Although his life ended far too early, Bobby DeBarge left behind a lasting musical legacy. His falsetto voice influenced many R&B singers who followed, and his role in shaping the DeBarge family's success helped define an important chapter in the history of soul and rhythm and blues. Even decades later, when fans revisit the music of that era, Bobby's voice remains one of the sounds that truly captured the spirit of classic R&B. Jermaine Stewart. In the mid-1980s, American pop and R&B radio was filled with energetic dance records, but occasionally a song appeared that felt slightly different from the rest. It had the same bright rhythm and catchy chorus that defined the decade. Yet the message behind it was unusually thoughtful. The voice delivering that message belonged to Jermaine Stewart, an artist who briefly captured worldwide attention with one of the most recognizable songs of the era. Jermaine Stewart was born September 7, 1957, in Columbus, Ohio, and later grew up in Chicago, a city known for its strong soul and R&B heritage. As a teenager, he developed a love for performance, particularly dancing and stage entertainment. Before recording his first album, Stewart gained experience as a dancer on the influential television program Soul Train, a show that introduced countless emerging performers to national audiences and helped shape the direction of Black popular music throughout the 1970s and 1980s. His career changed dramatically in 1986 when he released the album Frantic Romantic. One track from that project quickly stood out: "We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off." The song combined upbeat production with lyrics promoting patience and respect in relationships, a theme that contrasted with many pop songs of the time. Listeners responded immediately. The record climbed to number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 and also reached the top 10 in several international markets, turning Stewart into a recognizable name on both American and European charts. Stewart's voice became closely associated with a moment in pop culture when music videos, radio airplay, and dance clubs could transform a single track into a global success almost overnight. Despite the popularity of his signature hit, maintaining that level of commercial attention proved challenging as the music landscape shifted toward new styles in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Stewart continued recording and performing, but the industry's focus gradually moved in different directions. During the mid-1990s, his health began to decline. On March 17, 1997, Jermaine Stewart passed away in Chicago at the age of 39. Medical reports identified liver cancer as the official cause of death. Over time, some discussions have suggested the illness may have been connected to complications related to HIV/AIDS, though publicly available records most consistently list liver cancer. Even though his recording career lasted only a short period, Jermaine Stewart left a lasting cultural footprint. His biggest hit continues to appear on classic 1980s playlists, radio programs, and streaming collections. For listeners who remember the era, his voice represents more than just a chart-topping single. It reflects a moment when one song could capture the optimism, rhythm, and style of an entire generation. Kenny Green. In the early 1990s, R&B music was entering a new phase. The flashy sounds of the 80s were slowly giving way to something deeper, songs that focused more on emotion, vulnerability, and real-life experiences. Radio stations across the country began introducing listeners to a new wave of singers whose voices carried both smooth melodies and heartfelt storytelling. Among those emerging talents was Kenny Green, a young artist whose voice would soon become part of the soundtrack of that decade. Born January 26, 1969, in Harlem, New York, Kenny Green grew up surrounded by the musical culture of the city. Like many soul singers before him, his earliest performances took place in church, where gospel traditions helped shape his vocal style. Church choirs demanded discipline, emotion, and control, qualities that would later define Green's approach to R&B. As he grew older, he became increasingly interested in writing his own music, determined to express real feelings rather than simply perform songs written by others. That determination eventually led him to form the R&B trio Intro with fellow musicians Jeff Sanders and Clinton Buddy Wyke. Their sound arrived at the perfect moment. By the early 1990s, audiences were eager for smooth vocal groups that blended classic soul harmonies with modern production. When Intro released their debut album in 1993, one song quickly stood out: "Come Inside." The track received heavy rotation on R&B radio and climbed the Billboard R&B charts, introducing millions of listeners to Green's rich and expressive voice. Let me ask you something. If you listened to R&B radio during the early 90s, do you remember hearing "Come Inside" and immediately recognizing that smooth harmony? For many fans, that song captured the mood of the time perfectly. Its gentle rhythm and emotional delivery reflected the direction R&B music was taking as it moved toward a more intimate and reflective sound. But Kenny Green's influence extended beyond his own group. Within the industry, he was also known as a gifted songwriter. One of his most significant contributions came when he wrote "Love No Limit" for Mary J. Blige, a track that helped define the early sound of modern soul music. His writing showed a rare ability to combine honesty with melody, something many artists admired. However, during the late 1990s, Green began facing serious health challenges. He was diagnosed with HIV, and over time the illness weakened his immune system. On October 1, 2001, Kenny Green passed away in New York City at the age of 32 due to complications related to AIDS. Although his life ended far too early, the music he helped create continues to echo through R&B playlists today. His voice remains a reminder of a moment in the 1990s when soul music once again found its emotional center, and when a young singer from Harlem quietly helped shape the sound of an entire generation. Roderick "Pooh" Clark. In the early 1990s, R&B radio was filled with youthful energy. New groups were emerging with smooth harmonies, stylish performances, and songs that quickly became favorites among young listeners. One of those groups was High Five, a Texas-based quintet whose music helped define the sound of early 90s R&B. Among its members was Roderick "Pooh" Clark, a performer whose story would later become one of the most heartbreaking chapters connected to that era of music. High Five gained national attention in 1991 with their hit single, "I Like the Way, The Kissing Game," a song that reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and introduced the group to audiences across the country. Their youthful image and polished vocals quickly made them popular with teenagers and R&B fans alike. For many listeners growing up in the early 90s, High Five represented the excitement of a new generation of vocal groups bringing fresh energy to the genre. Clark was one of the original members of the group during its early success. Like many young artists entering the music industry at that time, he experienced the sudden transition from ordinary life to performing in front of large audiences and appearing on national television. The group's popularity led to tours, interviews, and the kind of attention that only a chart-topping record can create. In the mid-1990s, Clark was involved in a serious car accident that left him with life-changing injuries. The crash caused damage to his spinal cord and forced him to rely on medical assistance for daily care. During the years that followed, he faced a long and difficult recovery while also adjusting to life away from the music career that had once seemed full of promise. As time passed, Clark developed severe health complications. Reports later indicated that he had contracted HIV, and his immune system gradually weakened over the years that followed. Eventually, complications associated with AIDS led to a serious lung infection known as pneumocystis pneumonia, a condition that frequently affected patients during the early years of the epidemic when treatment options were still limited. Roderick "Pooh" Clark passed away on April 14, 2002, at the age of 31. Although his life ended tragically early, his connection to one of the most memorable R&B hits of the early 1990s remains part of music history. For fans who remember that era, the sound of High Five still brings back memories of a moment when youthful voices filled the airwaves, and when the future for those young performers seemed wide open. Ronnie Dyson. In the early 1970s, soul music was everywhere. From car radios to living room record players, powerful voices were shaping the sound of American music. Among those voices was Ronnie Dyson, a singer whose warm tone and emotional delivery helped him stand out during an era filled with extraordinary talent. Ronnie Dyson was born June 5, 1950 in Washington, D.C., and began performing at a very young age. Long before he appeared on radio playlists, Dyson was already gaining attention on stage. As a teenager, he joined the Broadway production of the groundbreaking musical Hair. The show became one of the most talked-about theater productions of the late 1960s, and Dyson's performance, especially his powerful vocals during the song Aquarius, impressed both audiences and critics. That early success opened the door for a recording career. By the early 1970s, Dyson had signed with Columbia Records and began releasing music that blended soul, pop, and R&B influences. His smooth vocal style and expressive delivery helped him build a loyal audience. Songs like Why Can't I Touch You introduced his voice to radio listeners across the country, and his recordings earned a place on many soul playlists throughout the decade. For fans who followed R&B during that time, Ronnie Dyson became known for his ability to bring genuine feeling into every performance. Let me ask you something. When you think about classic soul singers from the 1970s, do you remember hearing Ronnie Dyson's voice on the radio? As the music industry evolved during the 1980s, the spotlight shifted toward new sounds and younger artists. Still, Dyson remained respected among listeners who appreciated traditional soul vocals. Behind the scenes, however, he began facing serious health challenges during a period when the United States was dealing with the rapidly growing HIV/AIDS epidemic. In the late 1980s, information about the disease was still limited, and treatments were far less advanced than they are today. Many people who were diagnosed with HIV kept their condition private due to the stigma surrounding the illness. Ronnie Dyson's health declined during this difficult time. On November 10, 1990, Ronnie Dyson passed away in Philadelphia at the age of 40. Reports from that period indicated that his death was connected to heart failure associated with AIDS-related complications. Although his life ended much too soon, Ronnie Dyson left behind a meaningful musical legacy. His recordings remain part of classic soul collections, and his early Broadway performance in Hair continues to be remembered as an important moment in theater history. For listeners who grew up during the golden era of soul music, Ronnie Dyson's voice still represents the heartfelt sound of a time when powerful vocals could truly define a generation. David Cole. In the early 1990s, dance floors around the world were changing. The sound of pop, R&B, and club music was blending into something new. Songs with powerful beats, unforgettable hooks, and energy that could instantly fill a room with movement. Behind one of the most iconic records of that era was David Cole, a talented producer whose work helped shape the sound of early 1990s dance music. David Cole was born June 3, 1962, in Johnson City, New York. Unlike many performers who built their careers on stage, Cole found his passion behind the mixing board. He was a skilled keyboardist and studio producer who understood how rhythm, vocals, and production could come together to create a song that people would never forget. During the late 1980s, he formed a creative partnership with producer Robert Clivillés, and together they began experimenting with a new blend of dance, pop, and R&B. Their collaboration soon evolved into the group C+C Music Factory, a project that would launch them into international fame. In 1990, they released the album Gonna Make You Sweat. One song from that record quickly became impossible to ignore. Gonna Make You Sweat, Everybody Dance Now. The track exploded across radio stations and dance clubs, eventually reaching #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and becoming one of the most recognizable dance songs of the decade. The song's powerful beat and energetic production captured the excitement of a time when dance music was dominating both clubs and mainstream radio. Cole's production style helped push that movement forward. He understood how to combine strong vocals with high-energy rhythms, creating tracks that worked equally well on radio playlists and crowded dance floors. C+C Music Factory continued releasing successful songs throughout the early 1990s, including Here We Go, Let's Rock and Roll, and Things That Make You Go, both of which received strong airplay and helped establish the group as a major force in dance pop music. However, behind the scenes, David Cole was facing serious health challenges. During the early 1990s, he had been living with HIV, a time when treatments were still limited and the disease carried heavy stigma. As his immune system weakened, complications eventually developed. On January 24, 1995, David Cole passed away in New York City at the age of 32. Medical reports indicated that the cause was spinal meningitis associated with AIDS-related complications. Although his life ended far too soon, the music he helped create continues to live on. Songs produced by David Cole remain staples of classic dance playlists, reminding listeners of a moment when one powerful beat and one talented producer behind the scenes could bring an entire dance floor to life. Calvin Yarbrough. In the early 1980s, R&B music was filled with smooth duets and soulful harmonies that captured the emotions of love, heartbreak, and longing. Among the voices contributing to that sound was Calvin Yarbrough, a performer remembered for the warmth of his voice and the musical partnership he shared with singer Alyssa Peoples. Together, their collaboration helped shape a brief but memorable chapter in soul music history. Calvin Yarbrough was born July 21, 1947, in Dallas, Texas, a city rich in blues and gospel traditions. Music surrounded him during his early years, and it was through that environment that he developed a deep appreciation for singing and performance. His musical path became closely tied to Alyssa Peoples, whose voice complemented his own. Their partnership eventually evolved into the duo Yarbrough and Peoples, blending expressive vocals with the rhythmic direction that R&B music was beginning to explore during the late 1970s and early 1980s. Their major breakthrough came in 1980 with the hit "Don't Stop the Music," which climbed to #1 on the Billboard R&B chart and introduced the duo to a national audience. The track's upbeat groove made it a favorite on dance floors and radio stations alike. Following that success, they continued releasing music, including songs such as Heartbeats and Don't Waste Your Time, which helped maintain their presence within the soul and R&B scene. Another track associated with their catalog, "I'm Back for More," became familiar to fans of early 1980s R&B through its smooth melody and romantic theme. During that period, duets and vocal partnerships were an important part of the genre's identity, and Yarbrough and Peoples were among the artists contributing to that tradition. Let me ask you something. When you think about classic R&B duets from the early 1980s, do you remember hearing Calvin Yarbrough's voice alongside Alyssa Peoples on the radio? During the mid-1980s, however, many musicians were living through a difficult time as the United States confronted the growing HIV/AIDS epidemic. At that stage, medical understanding of the illness was limited, and effective treatments had not yet been developed. The disease affected numerous communities, including people connected to the music and entertainment industries. According to accounts from that period, Calvin Yarbrough's health declined during the mid-1980s due to complications linked to AIDS-related pneumonia. On December 15, 1987, he passed away at the age of 40. Although his life ended far too early, Calvin Yarbrough's voice remains part of the history of classic soul and R&B. The recordings he made with Alyssa Peoples continue to appear on nostalgic playlists and radio programs dedicated to the golden era of soul music. For listeners who remember that period, the songs he helped create still carry the spirit of a time when heartfelt vocals and memorable melodies defined the sound of R&B. Orish Grinstead. Bright lights, choreographed dance moves, and confident R&B vocals defined the sound of the late 1990s. During that period, girl groups were once again dominating radio stations and music television, bringing a new generation of voices into the spotlight. One of those voices belonged to Orish Grinstead, a member of the Las Vegas-based group 702, whose music helped capture the energy of that era. Orish Grinstead was born June 2, 1977 in Las Vegas, Nevada, growing up alongside her twin sister Irish Grinstead in a family where music and performance were strongly encouraged. Their journey into the music industry began when the sisters were discovered as teenagers and later introduced to producers connected to the rising R&B scene of the 1990s. Soon they became part of the Trio 702, a group named after the Las Vegas area code. The group began building recognition during the mid-1990s with songs that blended smooth harmonies and modern R&B production, Their biggest moment arrived in 1999, when they released the single Where My Girl's At. The song quickly climbed the charts, reaching number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became one of the most recognizable girl group anthems of the decade. Its confident lyrics and catchy rhythm made it a favorite among young listeners and helped establish 702 as one of the defining R&B acts of that period. Behind the success and performances, however, Orish Grinstead was dealing with serious health challenges that were largely unknown to the public at the time. She had been living with chronic kidney disease, a condition that gradually worsened over the years and required extensive medical treatment. On April 20th, 2008, Orish Grinstead passed away in Las Vegas at the age of 30. Medical reports confirmed that her death was caused by kidney failure related to the illness she had been battling for years. Although her life was tragically short, Orish Grinstead remains remembered for the music she helped create during a vibrant moment in R&B history. The songs recorded by 702 continue to echo through nostalgic playlists, reminding listeners of a time when girl groups once again filled the airwaves with harmony, confidence, and the unmistakable sound of late 1990s rhythm and blues. For millions of fans, these artists were more than just musicians. They were the voices of an era, voices that filled radios, nightclubs, and memories that still live on today. Yet behind the spotlight, many of them were facing battles the public rarely saw. The AIDS crisis changed the music industry forever. But even decades later, some people still ask difficult questions. Could more have been done to protect these artists? Did the industry truly support them during one of the most frightening health crises in modern history? Or were too many of these stories hidden until it was too late? What do you think? Were these legends failed by the industry, or was the world simply unprepared for what was happening at the time? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more powerful untold stories from Black music history, don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Black Excellence.